Hello everybody. Today we are going to start with a new form of writing. As you know, in semester 1 we have covered all the expository essays. Now we are going to start with the narrative essay. What is a narrative essay first? A narrative essay is a story. A narrative essay is a story that has, of course, specific points. So the first thing, it might teach a lesson, or it might make a specific point. A narrative essay is not a diary entry. The story is linked to the purpose of the essay. So when I say narrative, it means I am telling a story. What should be included in a narrative essay? First of all, in a narrative essay, miss, you have to use the first person. Yani, you have to use I, we, me, because I am telling a story based on a personal story. Narrative essays also contain specific sensory details because the author usually shows his feelings to the readers. Added to that, it is developed in chronological order. It means the events in the story are organized or developed in a chronological order, يعني in the order from the beginning to the middle to the end. What else does the narrative essay need? Since this is a story, the narrative essay needs everything a story needs. يعني what is called a story elements. Story elements are the plot, the characters, the conflict, the climax, and the lesson learned. Or, in other words, we can say the title, the characters, the setting, the problem, the events, the solution, and the lesson learned. So these are the story elements. Added to that, in narrative essays, it is very important to use the past tense. Why? Because usually when you are writing a story or telling a story, you are telling a story that happened with you in the past, يعني something that happened before. So that's why we should use the past tense in narrative essays. Usually in narrative essays also, we fill in a story map before we develop our essay. Remember, in the expository writing, we used to write an outline before developing our essays. Now in the narrative essays, we fill in a story map. As you can see in the story map, we write the title, the characters, the setting, of course, the time and the place, the thesis statement, which is very important, the conflict or the problem in the story, the events, and the lesson learned, because usually in narrative essays there is always a moral lesson in the essay. When will I use a narrative essay? I use a narrative essay, miss, when I want to tell or write a story that happened with me or with somebody else. Okay? Planning the narrative essay. Let's see how we plan a narrative essay. First of all, we write a thesis statement, just as with any other essay. تعرفوا انتوا on all the essays we have to write or include a thesis statement. Brainstorm for a personal story or observation that illustrates or proves the thesis statement. يعني I have to brainstorm, or I have to give background information. I have to start my essay with the brainstorming so that when I write the thesis, the writer would understand what I mean. Outline or web the important parts of the story to be told. You can outline them in the story map. Write an introductory paragraph that includes the thesis statement and then write the story. Because this is a story, use as many paragraphs as necessary to tell the story. Write a conclusion that reflects on the thesis statement. So same as the other essays. We are following the same pattern as the other essay. Start with the thesis statement. The thesis will depend upon the story to be proven. The thesis can be something general in the case of a narrative essay. When I write a thesis statement in a narrative essay, the thesis can be something general, not as in the expository writing. It should be very specific. For example, you may write, oftentimes people do not follow simple directions. However, these campers learned just how important following directions can be. It means that the story is going to be about following directions by campers. Maybe something happened with them, maybe they faced a certain problem because they didn't follow the directions, and so on. So this thesis statement is just very simple, and it's general, it's not very specific, but it can tell what is the story about. What would you expect from this thesis? As the reader, you will expect to learn why following directions is important, as I told you in the previous slide. And also as the reader, you will expect to read a story about camping and about a problem that happened with campers. Additional ideas for your thesis. So without a thesis or a point, you are not really writing a narrative essay, but a narrative. Make sure to have a point. You can get help finding a point when you want to write a thesis, you have to think about sayings or quotes that teach a lesson. Think about lessons learned from any fable that you read or any story that you've read. Think about a time when you learned something valuable. Read quotations to spawn ideas. Read your own journals for a time something happened worth telling others about. So all of these can help you come out with a valuable thesis statement. So now we move to the parts of the narrative essay, which is the conflict, the climax, the events, the ending, and the lesson learned. Let's see, what do we write in every one of them? In the conflict is the problem you faced throughout the story. So this is the conflict, the problem. The climax is the part where the tension or action reaches its highest point. The point in which the problem reaches its highest point. Are the stages of the story. The events are the stages of the story. What happened in the story. You should write them as phrases, not complete sentences. In the chart, in the story map, you should write them as phrases, not complete sentences. The ending is the solution, or what happens at the end. Okay, what happens at the end of the story. The lesson learned is the recommendation or result learned from the experience you passed through. Of course, when you pass through any experience, you learn something. So based on what you narrated to your readers, there is a recommendation or a lesson learned. So you have to share this lesson or this experience with the readers. These are some transitional words that you can use in a narrative writing. Of course, some of them are time expressions, some of them are expressions to connect the ideas together. We also here included concluding transitions in which you can use them in the last paragraph, like all in all, at last, finally, in conclusion, in summary, and so on. So now I move to just a sum up. This is the introduction. So the introduction in a narrative essay should contain 3 parts: the hook, set the scene, and the thesis statement. The hook is when you start with a quotation, you start with a statement that catches the reader's attention, with a question, with a fact, with anything else. Then you have to set the theme, provide information the information the reader will need to understand the story. Who are the major characters? When and where is it taking place? Is it a story about something that happened to you? And so on. So this is when you set the scene. And then the thesis statement, as we said, it tells the general idea of the story. The body paragraphs, of course, we have to say what happened to us, the events in general, يعني. Then the conclusion, of course, you restate the thesis using different words, and of course you state the moral lesson or the lesson learned. A personal narrative essay writing model. Now I'm gonna talk about a model. We're gonna explain it together. Helping others cope during traumatic or difficult times could have such great positive effects on the person who is suffering. In a well-organized essay of 150 to 200 words, explain the above statement by recounting a time when you or someone you know helped someone who was going through a difficult time, such as illness, injury, dealing with a new environment, and so on. Self-confidence, a real treasure. This is the model. So as you can see, we started with a hook. Self-confidence is surely the basis for a healthy personality. This is the hook. It is in fact a great feeling of one's worth and importance. Thus, a person with low self-confidence suffers a lot in his or her daily life. Rami, a classmate of ours, suffered this problem, and his low confidence was revealed through his shyness and inability to cope with his new school environment. So this is the thesis. The part written in red is the thesis. So these are the body paragraphs. Of course, as you can see, we have two body paragraphs. We discussed in these two body paragraphs the problems that Rami faced, what happened to him, why he felt unaccepted by others, why was he shy, why was he embarrassed, why was he afraid, why couldn't he cope or get used to the new school. So the story here is that the writer is telling us about Rami, and is telling us how he helped Rami restore his self-confidence and become a stronger person and cope with his new school and his new friends. Of course, it ends with a moral lesson, and it ends with the importance of helping